Welcome, friends. It's me, your buddy Suze. And today I'd like to bring you a classical reading that maybe you've never heard. Get my little skirt in order. I got shorts on. Don't worry. All right. So this is from the book, Dynamic Freedoms. And like I've told you, this was my Uncle Charlie's book. Charles Bauer, an admiral in the United States Navy during World War II, was also a Mason, Freemason. And there's so many stories in this book. And I thought this holiday weekend was a good time to begin this journey. So today I'll be bringing you excerpts from Washington's farewell address. This is the United States, September 19th, 1796. After announcing his retirement from public life, President George Washington said, "Here perhaps I ought to stop, but a solicitude for your welfare and the apprehension of danger natural to that solitude urge me to offer to your solemn contemplation and to recommend to your frequent review some sentiments which are the result of much reflection, of no inconsiderable observation, and which appear to me all important to the permanency of your felicity as a people. These will be offered to you as the disinterested warnings of a parting friend who can possibly have no personal motive to bias his counsel." I don't know if I mentioned to tell y'all, this is my cousin George speaking, and later on we'll get into it in the Glasscock Family Quarterly. The Glasscocks are related to George Washington on his mama's side. So I felt it only fitting that as family I could bring this. Okay, so let's go on. It says, "Interwoven as it is the love of liberty with every ligament of your hearts, no recommendation of mine is necessary to fortify or confirm the attachment. The unity of government, which constitutes you one people, is also now dear to you. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as it is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed, to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth, as this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies almost constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously directed, it is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourself to think and speak of it as of the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealous anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspicion that it can in any event be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts. For this, you have every inducement of sympathy and interest, citizens by birth or choice of a common country. That country has a right to concentrate your affections The name of American, which belongs to you, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. With slight shades of differences, you have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in common cause, fought, and triumphed together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint councils and joint efforts, of common dangers, sufferings, and successes. In contemplating the cause which may disturb our union, it occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discrimination, or yes, discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western. Once designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference in local interest and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. To the efficacy and permanency of your union, a government for the whole is indispensable. Sensible of this momentous truth, you have improved upon from your first essay by the adoption of a constitution of government better calculated than your former for an intimate union and for the efficacious management of your common concerns. This government, the offspring of our own choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted upon full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free in its principles, in the distribution of its powers, uniting security with energy, and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, as a just claim to your confidence and your support. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political systems is the right of people to make and to alter their constitution of government. But the constitution, which at any time exists, till changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people, is sacredly obligatory upon all. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. All obstructions to the execution of laws, all combinations and associations, under whatever plausible character, with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities, are destructive of this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community, and, according to the alternate triumphs of different parties, to make the public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous project of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans, digested by common councils and modified by mutual interest. However, combinations or associations of the above description may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men and women will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Towards the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to its acknowledged authority, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however specious the pretext. One method of assault may be to effect in the forms of the Constitution alterations which will impair the energy of the system, and thus to undermine what cannot be directly overthrown. In all the changes to which you may be invited, remember that time and habit are at least as necessary to fix the true character of governments as of other human institutions. That experience is the surest standard by which to test the real tendency of the existing constitution of a country. That facility in changes upon the credit of mere hypotheses and opinion exposes to perpetual change from the endless variety of hypothesis and opinion. And remember, especially, that for the efficient management of your common interest in a country so extensive as ours, a government of as much vigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. Liberty itself will find in such a government, with powers properly distributed and adjusted, its surest guardian. It is indeed little else than a name where the government is too feeble to withstand the enterprise of faction, to confine each member of the society within the limits prescribed by the laws, and to maintain all in the secure and tranquil enjoyment of the rights of person and property. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party. Generally, this spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its root in the strongest passions of the human mind. It exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed. But in those of the popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy. The alternate dominion of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which is in different ages and countries, has perpetuated the most horrid enormities. It itself a frightful despotism, but that leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, and sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation and the ruins of the public liberty. The common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and the duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. It is important, likewise, that the habits of thinking in a free country should inspire caution in those entrusted with its administration to confine themselves within their respective constitutional spheres, avoiding in the exercise of the powers of one department to encroach upon another. The spirit of encroachment tends to consolidate the powers of all the departments into one, and thus to create whatever the form of government, the real despotism. A just estimate of that love and power and proneness to abuse it, which predominates in the human heart, is sufficient to satisfy us of the truth of this position. The necessity of reciprocal checks in the exercise of political power by dividing and distributing it into different depositories and constituting each the guardian of the public weal against invasions by the others has been evinced by experiments, ancient and modern, some of them in our country and under our own eyes. To preserve them must be as necessary as to institute them. If, in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way which the Constitution designates. But let there be no charge by usurpation, for this, in one instance, may be the instrument of good. It is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. This precedent must always greatly overbalance in permanent evil any partial or transient benefit which the use can at any time yield. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duty of men and citizens. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion, whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of particular structure. Reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. I think Cousin George might have meant spiritual, but that's okay. 'Tis substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric. Promote them as an object of primary importance, institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge. In proportion as the structure of a government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. As a very important source of strength and security, cherish public credit. One method of preserving it, to use it as sparingly as possible, avoiding occasions of expense by cultivating peace, but remembering also that timely disbursements to prepare for danger frequently prevent much greater disbursements to repel it. Avoiding frequent, likewise, the accumulation of debt, not only by shunning occasions of expense, but by vigorous exertions in time of peace to discharge the debts which unavoidable wars may have occasioned, not ungenerously throwing upon prosperity the burden which we ourselves ought to bear. The execution of these maxims belong to your representatives, but it is necessary that public opinion should cooperate to facilitate to them the performance of their duty. It is essential that you should practically bear in mind that towards the payment of debts, there must be revenue. That to have revenue, there must be taxes. That no taxes can be devised which are not more or less inconvenient and unpleasant. That the intrinsic embarrassment inseparable from the selection of the proper objects, which is always a choice of difficulties, ought to be a decision, a decisive motive for a candid construction of the conduct of the government in making it, and for a spirit of acquiescence in the measures for obtaining revenue which the public exigencies may at any time dictate. Observe good faith and justice towards all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct. And can it be that good policy does not equally enjoin in? It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and, at no distant period, a great nation, to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by an exalted justice and benevolence. Who can doubt that in the course of time and things the fruits of such a plan would richly repay any temporary advantages which might be lost by a steady adherence to it? Can it be that Providence has not connected the permanent felicity of a nation with its virtue? Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens. The jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of republican government. Its jealousy, to be useful, must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided, instead of a defense against it. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interest. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have them as little political connection as possible. So far as we have already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here let us stop. Europe has set a primary interest, which to us have none, or a very remote relation. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics, or of ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships and enmities. See, it always was the woman's fault. I love how that's written. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world so far, as we are now at liberty to do it. For let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. Taking care always to be ourselves by suitable establishments, on a respectably defensive posture, we may safely trust to temporary alliances for extraordinary emergencies. Harmony, liberal intercourse with all nations are recommended by policy, humanity, and interest. But even our commercial policy should hold an equal or impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences, consulting the natural course of things, diffusing and diversifying by gentle means the streams of commerce, by forcing nothing, establishing of powers so disposed, in order to give to trade a stable course, to define the rights of our merchants, and to enable the government to support them. Conventional rules of intercourse, the best that present circumstances and mutual opinion will permit, but temporarily, and liable to be from time to time abandoned or varied as experience and circumstances shall dictate, constantly keeping in view that 'tis folly in one nation to look for disinterested favors from another, that it must pay with a portion of its independence for whatever it may accept under that character, that by such acceptance it may place itself in the conditions of having given equivalents for nominal favors and yet being reproached with ingratitude for not giving more. There can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. In offering to you, my countrymen, these counsels of an old and affectionate friend, I dare not hope they will make the strong and lasting impression I could wish. But if they may now and then recur to moderate the fury of party spirit, to warn against the mischiefs of foreign intrigue, or guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism, this hope will be a full recompense for the solicitude for your welfare by which they have been dictated. Now, let's keep in mind that this was written in 1796. And remember, I told you that we got a different story going on here in the Glasscock family saga. Because you see, Dr. George Glasscock was murdered just a couple years later. And it was because of the factions where one group was better liked than another. And so what Cousin George does here is gives us something that now we're going to let go of the pain of. Because, see, he kind of did what my dad used to talk about. Talk like he had a paper asshole, didn't hold wind. Now, this wasn't his fault. You got to remember, this man was also controlled by the same factions that you and I are. See, this didn't just happen 20, 50, 70 years ago. This has been going on. Some would even go as far as to say that George Washington was not the first president of the United States. And I'm sure many of you have heard that. There is discrepancies upon the number. Some say it's under a double digit. Some say it's as high as 14. But that's not really important today. Now, the same year that Washington retired is the year this story picks up for my cousin, George for my kin, George Glasscock. George Washington was just a cousin through his mama's side, remember? We got a lot of Freemasonry running around here, and I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I'm saying this is the system that's collapsing now in front of our very eyes, and we need to come to terms with it and release it and let it go and never make the same mistakes again. But in order to do that, we need a narrative. So let me pick up here. And we've got the guy responsible for his death by the name of Philip Alston. And they were both working in local government. And there was an article written about Proculus. And that blew my mind because on Sophia's Emporium, I had actually done one of the shows and brought in the whole Proculus element. And of course, if you were a true citizen to the state, That is the very reason you will lose your head. How about that? But I'm going to pick up right here. Now, of course, we have a lot of dirty deals going on. And so we have a newspaper article, typically signed Proculus. And it was so vehement in its denunciation of Alston that this other dude considered it his duty to refer the matter back to the Assembly for investigation. You see, this is going on in City Hall. Okay. The Moore County minutes recorded February 20th, 1786, that Philip Alston, in a very abusive manner, treated George Glasscock. He said that Alston, then sitting as justice on the bench, Glasscock, it will be remembered, had taken Alston's place as clerk of the court. According to his epitaph, inscribed on his tombstone at Cross Hill, Dr. Glasscock had been a surgeon on the medical staff of the American Army at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. He was also the son of William Glasscock and Esther Ball Glasscock, and was related through his mother to George Washington's mother. So, where was his influence when George Glasscock was murdered? And if he would have been able to be true to his morality, maybe the Glasscock name wouldn't have been wiped off the Georgia census records in the 1830s. Just maybe. Interestingly enough, there still is a Glasscock, Georgia, too. But there's a lot of things in this book that let us know, sure as anything, that you see George and all of them, no matter what you think about them, they already knew about the duality. They already knew about the temptations. They already knew about the trickery and deceitfulness. And they already knew about the queen. You see, they already knew the taxes were going there. This goes on and on. So you break free compared to what you were before. But there's still booties to kiss and people to silence. Now we're at the time where we can no longer go along with this silencing nonsense, because otherwise we won't have many more choices. So I will be bringing you the entirety of this book along the way. But we're going to keep it short and sweet. And yes, eventually this book will be uploaded online for all of y'all to see. Believe it or not, when a Mason passes, his book is either supposed to be buried with him or burned. And you ask, why didn't that happen? I don't know. A lot of people might think there was a little conspiracy around it, but in the end, my Uncle Charlie was in a nursing home. He was very healthy, but he lived away from his river home for about a decade. And I guess really nobody went back, and the kids were already grown. I don't know, because no one in my family communicated. No different than the lack of communication that we have now with the forces and principalities and powers and the things we know as governments and institutions. Of course, this was back before they knew about monopolies. But like you all know, you want to know the real church? It's the monopoly, kiddies. It's the incorporations. And it is the institutions. So make sure you know who you're getting on your knees for, okay? Today is July 1st, in the year of our Lord, 2017. Have a safe weekend. Don't blow anybody up, and keep the faith. Peace, love, and light from the Big Yellow House on the third cosmic ray in Sue's world. Bye-bye. And peace out.